Hello everybody, this is Bob Thomas, picture of me down in my workshop. It's a wonderful workshop. I've got a chair and a radio and comfortable, big double down windows looking out on a wooded area. Right next to it is a bathroom. The only problem is it's pretty messy, and when we have a bunch of company over, Katie says go down there and shut that door so people can't see it. We're in the family room that's next to my workshop. It's a walkout basement of our townhouse. This ship here is the Royal Sovereign. It's the third ship I built of plank on frame. It's a kit from Carta Augusta. The quality of the ship was not very good, so I had to get a lot of lumber from nearby, but it was inexpensive, so that's why I did it, and I think it turned out looking pretty good. Carta Augusta, I've got 3 or 4 other models you'll be seeing on our journey here, but it's no longer available, and they were reasonably priced, but it looks pretty good for my first attempt, and this was probably done about, back in the 80s, 1980s. Here's a stern view of the Royal Sovereign from the kit I just talked about. It's got a lot of nice casting in it. It was a lot of fun to build. It's good size. And you can see it's holding up very well down there over all these years. Here's a shot of the inside top deck of the Royal Sovereign. You can see that it has a lot of nice castings to it, and it's held up very well through the years. I'm very proud of it. A bow view of the Royal Sovereign. You can see it's well detailed. Here's a view of the 1 to 98 Victory. It's a scratch-built model, a solid hull. Came from Model Shipways. The plans for it, you can see that it's been coppered and is still under construction. I started building this one back in 1965 to 1970, and it's coming along very well. Here's a rear view, stern view of the Victory. You can see it's taken me many, many years to finish it as I work on the stern, but again, it's all scratch built, and the windows, some of them are built by hand, some are plastic windows. And normally the Victory did not have red windows, but I kind of like the red contrast against the blue and the flesh-colored yellow. Here's a view of the French Lorinoque. I don't remember the manufacturer, but I converted it from a French warship into the Sirius, which is one of the first ships that sailed the ocean totally under steam. It kind of converted it from a 3-mast to a 2-mast, and someday I may rig it. Here's another shot into my workshop. All the walls have shelves on them for the models I've built through the many years. This one shows basically plastic kits. I have a lot of plastic kits through the years. When I was young, I had great difficulty building plastic because they fell apart. I couldn't get the decals to stay on. But a friend at work was a master builder in plastic, and he entered contests, and he'd come into my office on lunch and teach me how to build these models, how to glue them, how to paint them, how to put decals on them. And that got me going in plastic too. So you can see up there that we're dealing with the F100, the F80, F84, etc., F86. Below that is about almost the same scale as some plastic military. There's a picture of the 8-inch howitzer, which my older brother manned in the Korean War. Below that are some old 1/18 scale old-time cars that I developed way back, back when I was probably in high school from Hudson Miniatures. And below that you can see just piles of my paint and other armor. Here we are in my family room again. This is a model of the Fair American, fabulous hull to it. It's a solid model. It comes from Model Shipways. It's the very first model ship that I built back in 1965. It's gone through many moves, gotten damaged and repaired, and I'm very proud of it because it's my first model. Here's a model of my first plank on frame. It's a model again from Carta Augusta. It's a Spanish galleon, and it's double planked with mahogany covering, and probably more rigging on here than I'm used to doing because it was my very first plank on frame. And so I'm proud of that one. That one's in our sunroom upstairs in the house. I'm also a model railroader. Minnesota, I'm using O-gauge. Here's a locomotive that came in kit form, produced many, many years ago. I found it at a flea market, and I'm just finishing assembling it with all its brass castings and parts. And later on, you'll see my layout where it's going to go. Here's another shot of a locomotive I have in my layout. Again, it's O-scale, narrow gauge, Denver Rio Grande. I've got the locomotive disassembled for lubrication and adjusting of the drivetrain. It's a very nice, quiet running locomotive, quite beautiful. Bought it at a flea market. Thank you. Here's a shot of my erector set collection. They're all from the 1950s, and they range in size from the 5.5 all the way through to the 12.5. On top, I have a few Ferris wheel and an airplane ride made from these sets. Here's a picture of the O-gauge railroad I have in the other room. It shows a scratch-built O'Fare depot, a couple box cars, and over to the right you see a brass locomotive I built from a kit. Here's another view of the O-gauge railroad. It shows a engine service facility, a caboose, coaling facility, sand, and a couple engines on there. Most of these are scratch-built or built from plans of the short line narrow gauge Gazette. This is a view of an English officer's dueling pistol. I built it from a block of wood. The metal pieces was able to get from a business up in Minnesota. It will actually shoot. I'm very proud of it because it's a beautiful English walnut. I got the walnut from my brother, a big block of it, and fitted all these brass pieces. It took about 5 years before all these brass pieces were actually available from the actual gun that someone owned, and then started reproducing copies of the brass pieces from it. And it will actually shoot. It's a real gun. Here's a shot of the Frederick Wilhelm up in our dining room, on our next to our dining room table. It's another Carta Augusta model. The wood was quite bad in it, but it had nice castings. The drawings were kind of wrong, so I did some digging to find out how it really looked. I was able to buy a lot of the wood at the local hobby shop, and it's single planked with mahogany. And so it's a lot of color to it, and I just finished rigging it maybe 2 years ago. Stern view shot of the Frederick Wilhelm. Here's a Royal Yacht. Again, it's built by Carta Augusta again. The reason I have so many Carta Augusta kits is because they're so inexpensive. There was a hobby shop in Minneapolis that specialized in ships from Italy and around the world. And so Carta Augusta was the cheapest ones he sold. Back in the corner of the shop, they had a professional model maker, and he was in the process of building a ship model for an executive at 3M Company for his office, and he gave me a lot of tips on how to build these ships. And when he put the first planking on, it was an absolute mess, kind of like watching sausage being made. But then when he did the veneer on the outside, it looked beautiful. Here's a model of the Sir Gal's Cutty Shark. It's 36 inches long, 1:75 scale. I found it in the hobby shop. It came from a sale. The box was pretty well chewed up, but the wood and material and everything was excellent in it. And I intend to rig that someday, but I just finished this last year and set it aside. Below that, you can see a picture of the Cessna 172, which I haven't hung on the wall yet, but that's the airplane that I soloed in. Here's a close-up view of the bow of the Cutty Sark. I tried something different on this model. The brass etchings that came with the model, I soaked them in an acid that I used for making printed circuit boards, and lifted all the scroll work off the background so you could see the wood planking behind it. Here's another shot of the Cutty Shark. Here's a stern view of the Cutty Shark. Gives you some idea of the beauty of the kit itself. Well, here we are. We just leapt from the basement into the garage. It's a 3-car garage. I'm restoring an Austin Healey 1956 100. I've been working on this car for about 20 years. Every time you get a move, you get slowed down in it, but everything's totally rebuilt in it now, and what I'm doing is the bodywork, priming. The engine's totally rebuilt, new wiring, brakes. I'll have new upholsteries going into it. And the only time that the car was out of the garage is when I took the engine apart, took it to a machine shop, and had it ground down for new bearings, etc., etc. And I've had the engine running, runs great, nicely balanced. I've had a lot thrown through the years because I've always wanted a Healey 100, and I always wanted to build one. Front view of the Healey, I have actually all the chrome pieces ready to go on, and it's in primer right now, and I'm doing some smoothing. You can see some little tapes, blue tapes on there. Those are all little defects that I see when I hold the light up, and I'll have to smooth those. Here's just another view of the little 4-cylinder engine to the Healey 100. It's actually a tractor engine from England. Got a lot of torque, wonderful little engine, runs as smooth as silk. Now we're back in Arizona, and we're out in our garage here in Arizona, Sun City Grand, and we're looking at a railroad that I've built in there. This is a smaller one, it's an HO gauge. I belong to a group of guys that we get in his garage, and we operate. It takes about 3 hours with a stop for a beer. This is a logging kit, sawmill. Came from my older brother who died, and this kit hadn't been built yet, so I brought it down here, and I finished this a few years ago. Here's another shot of the railroad. This is over the corner 90-degree turn. This is a turntable, and we're going to head to the right down to the 16-foot section of the rest of the railroad. Here's another shot of the railroad. I'm building basically a diorama, not too much operation. This is the service facilities. You can see the engine house, coaling tower, sand and water tower, and the yard for the cars that I park there. Okay. Here's another shot of the railroad as we're moving down towards the garage door. You can see the scenery in the back, which is basically painted wallpaper that I put up. Here's a shot during the middle of the layout. It shows a mine up atop, some industries. I like to have a lot of industries and sidings because it creates more interest, and you can come out and operate with several people. We're closing in on the old-time town that I call Thomas. You see a beer factory here, and you see starting to see the Golden Slipper Saloon and the sheriff's office, and starting to get engines as we move further into the old-time town about the turn of the century. Here's another shot as we move further into the town. Dwayne asked me if we've ever hung anybody in this town, but I said no. Here's another view of the town as we move further towards the garage door. Here's another view of the town as we're moving slowly out of the town and towards the harbor, where I have a riverboat that brings in a lot of equipment. Now, all those buildings that you saw throughout the entire layout there, except for maybe one or two, I built through the years from kits, a Campbell scale model kits, and I probably started building these kits back in the probably late 1960s. And when I decided to build my HO layout out here in Arizona, I put them in a huge box, threw them in the back of our station wagon, and brought them down here. Now we're back to model ships again, which you guys are most interested in. Here's a paddle wheeler. I forget the manufacturer, but I bought it from Hobby Bench down here, built it down here, and it's close to the scale of the HO scale, which is 1:87, and this is a 1:98 kit. And I thought it'd fit in our harbor there, and I've got some plastic water there, and behind that you see a smaller sawmill. Here's a quick side view of the paddle wheeler with some people on it and docks and unloading, etc. Here's another hobby I'm in. It's an erector set. When I was a little kid back in the 40s and early 50s, my favorite toy was an erector set, and I collect erector sets, and I have a number of them up in Minnesota. This is one I found in an antique shop down here in Glendale, and I restored it, repainted it, assembled it, and got it working. Here's the workbench down in my garage here in Arizona. You can see I'm working on what I call my church victory, and I have a nice workshop here because I have an extended garage, and the garage is big enough for 2 cars and a golf cart, but I was fortunate enough to have an extended garage where I've got my workbench and this is where I build virtually everything that I have down here in terms of model ships. Here's a shot of the Kate Corey whaling ship. This one has kind of an interesting story to it. It's a solid hull. I bought it many, many years ago, and my sister-in-law wanted to build a model ship. So I sold the kit to her for $50. I finished off the hull so that she would have an easier time putting some deck details and some mast and rigging on it. And after about 5 years, 6 years, I asked her, how you doing on the ship? And she says, it just looks too complex. So I bought it back for the $50 and brought it down here in Arizona and finished it here. It's my understanding that this kit is still available in solid hull, and I think Bob Becker called me on the phone and he's working on it. Each one of the boats there, the little whale boats, is a kit in itself. Wonderful little kit from Model Shipways. Here's another bow view of the Kate Corey and the detail that's included within the kit. Again, remember, this is a solid hull kit. Turns out quite beautiful. Here's a stern view of the Kate Corey again, showing the marvelous detail that comes with the kit. I highly recommend this kit for anybody who wants to start with a solid hull and have a lot of fun. Makes it beautiful. I believe that the scale is 3/16 or a quarter. Here's a center view of the Kate Corey, showing the boiling parts for getting the oil out of the blubber. Another view of the Kate Corey showing the detail. Here's a shot of the Arizona at the time, 1941. The model came from China. Excellent detailed model consisting of plastic and metal parts. And as you look at it now, it's over 3 feet long. It's a very large kit, very detailed. Here's another shot of the decking on the Arizona. Again, you can see how detailed it is, and it's got photo etch parts for railings. Those are metal guns on it, and the Arizona at that time had all 14 inches. Later on, with the other modern ones, they had 16 inches. Beautiful model. Paid, it came mail order, cost a little less than $200. Here's another view of the Arizona, the stern view, and you see the lifeboats and the cannon swivels go up and down. Here's a view of the Liberty ship that I built out of wood, solid hull. It's the same scale as the Arizona. You can see how large the Arizona is. This hull, machine carved hull, came from the stores for our older club, and there was a roll of blueprints that came, and I brought it home, and lo and behold, the blueprints matched the hull, and it was from Blue Jacket. So I called Blue Jacket and I said, I have the machine carved hull and the plans. Can you send me the parts list? And so I ordered all the metal parts. The rest of this is all scratch built, and again, it's the same scale, 200:1. Here's a plastic model of a landing craft. Sitting inside it, you see a Sherman tank ready for landing. I forget the scale. No, the scale on this is 1:35. Wonderful little model from Hasegawa. Here's a 1/32 scale model of the Apache attack helicopter. The reason I have this model is because I did the initial cost estimates with a group of guys for the electronics that go on this helicopter for steering all the sensors in the front. And I spent many a time out here in Mesa, Arizona on the production line working on this helicopter. In fact, one time I almost fell out of it onto the ground. And that's why I have a model to remind me what I did for many years working in the industry. As you can see, I can't seem to leave plastic models alone. Here again is 1/35. So this is a Israeli Sherman, and of course our fabulous little Jeep. Here are some more views of some 1/32 tanks. You got the Pershing, and I forget the name of the other one. It almost looks like an M60, but I don't think it is. Back in Minnesota, I have a series of tanks, and I have a model of the M1 tank, and I spent a lot of time down in Fort Knox riding around on an M1, getting ready to put some electronics in it. And I'll tell you, for a tank that massive running on a turbine engine, it had tremendous acceleration. Here's some more plastic models. Like I say, I can't leave them alone. This is a Spitfire. Over to the left is a Focke-Wulf 190, and to the right is a bubble top P-47. They changed it over to F-47. They called it the Jug. fantastic airplane, big four-bladed propeller, huge big Pratt & Whitney engine in it. And Robert S. Johnson used that engine in Europe, and in 1 year he had 28 kills, and all were single-engine airplanes, Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitts, except for 4, which were twin engines. Then he came back to the States. Here's another shot of the P-47 bubble top. Next to it is the P-40B, which is actually the model, the airplane model that was used by the Flying Tigers. The later ones you generally see were called the P-40Es, and they had bigger intakes and a longer tail for better maneuverability. Here's a model of a Rio Grande Southern engine, outside frame, that goes on my layout. Extremely detailed. This came from my older brother that had it. When he died, I inherited it because my younger brother isn't in model railroading. Here's a shot of a figure that's about the right scale for the San Felipe, which was lost in 1690. Now, the San Felipe is what, through I think it was 3 years, I kept bringing this to our meetings so you could see the progress of the model, and I've basically completed now, but I haven't rigged it, and I probably won't because it's easier for me to transport it if I take it back to Minnesota. Here's a side view of the San Felipe. Again, it's a 1:75, 1:78 scale model from Mantua, Sergal. This is the one I kept taking to our meeting every month. It's now completed the way I want to take it with the stub masts on it. Now here's the bow view of it. I asked for some help at the club meeting on how I had handled the parts up here and how they were bent. Well, nobody had an idea, so there was enough material in there that I made a form, bent them there, and soldered them together, and then put them on the model. And it's a very detailed bow view. And down below it, on my platform that I built it, you can see I had a little spare cannon I put there to kind of give it a little bit of stuff. And I painted the figurehead in the front there with what I caught with some nice colors. So it's a beautiful model. The materials were excellent, and I bought this model in a box from a fella here in Arizona probably 6-7 years ago, and he went blind and called the club and had models for sale, and I bought this one. Here's another bow view looking at the forecastle. Here's a view of the midships with one lifeboat, and then the detail for the railings and some of the cannon. The original model had 2 lifeboats on these cross beams. I decided to only put one there so you could see more of the deck below it. Stern view of the same ship, getting back towards the quarterdeck. Here's a stern view of the same ship, and I hope all you guys can see that when I said that casting there was off by a 1/4 inch, you can see why it had to be moved back by a 1/4 inch. Otherwise, all that stuff wouldn't have fit properly there, particularly the railings. Here's a bottom view. I think it's USS Constitution. It's a model that came from Model Shipways, and I modified it quite a bit, and I didn't use hardly any paint on it, but you'll see it later on when we move up a little bit to it. It's a marvelous kit from Model Shipways. Quality materials all the way, excellent plans. You can see I'm a fan of Model Shipways. Here's a bow view of the Constitution. I modified it in the sense that normally all the guns were dummy cannons with a block behind them, and I completed all the cannons and I completed the lower deck, so you can peer in any one of the open gun ports and you can see the lower deck and see through the ship. Well, here's another view of the Constitution, and I've got stub masts on it again so I can move it somewhere if I have to back to Minnesota, because it's one of the ships I'd like to keep for a long time. Here's another view, kind of midships towards the stern of the Constitution, showing all the carronades on there. And I'm not sure if they were painted red on the real ship or not. I know on the Victory they were more of a cream color than red. But anyway, you can see I used different colored walnuts and woods on here and very little paint. Here's a stern view of the Constitution, showing the lineup of all the carronades on it. What's interesting about this model, it's 1:75, 1:78, and the Victory that I'm building is a 1:75, 1:78, and over the decking, they're basically the same length, and you'd never suspect it looking at the Victory in Harbor in Portsmouth or looking at the Constitution out in Boston, but they're the same length. And because it's very narrow and very long, it was very fast. This is a model of the Endeavor, but I didn't like the Endeavor because it was so blunt bowed and it was more a freighter. So I sharpened up the bow, added some more guns to it, and put some pirate flags on it, and I'm calling it a pirate ship. But it's Mantua's model. It's a nice model, single plank walnut, and I enjoyed building it. Here's a mid view of the Endeavor converted to a pirate ship with the lower deck with some detail on it. Here's a stern view of the Endeavor converted to a pirate ship. You can see the pirate flag, and one of the few times that I built a ship that I actually did all the deck work with the cuts and everything. I didn't use the tree nails, but you can see the decking with all the cuts, and each one is about 4 feet long, and then the little side cannon on it. So the pirates must have overpowered it and had taken it away from a British shipping company. Here's another view of the Bounty modified as a pirate ship from the stern. Bow view of the Bounty, showing that I've sharpened it up from its blunt bow as a freighter so to make it a lot faster ship. This ship here is the model Shipways again. You can tell they're my favorite manufacturer. It's the Arm Virginia sloop. It's a ship that I would recommend to anybody that wants to start building a plank on bulkhead model. It's a beautiful workmanship of wood in it, the walnut, everything is top notch in it, and you can build it very quickly but have a very detailed model. And I did rig it all because the rigging was not that extensive, but it's interesting because the bowsprit was very long and the mainmast is right way back. So anybody that wants to build a plank on frame and have a beautiful model display, I recommend the Arm Virginia sloop. Here's a rear view of the Arm Virginia sloop, and you can see the various colors from the walnut strips that they provide in the kit. Here's a stern view of the Arm Virginia sloop showing the extensive detail that's provided within the kit. I did substitute brass cannon for the cast gamut barrels that they had in there, but again you can see the beauty of it and the detail. Here's a bow view of the Arm Virginia sloop showing again the detail. Here's the last picture of the Arm Virginia sloop. It's a 1/4 inch scale model. You get the nice size of it, some simple rigging, and I've got it shown in the kitchen above my sink. And once again, I highly recommend this as a model to start if you want to plank on frame